Hi, and welcome to this channel. I know. Those are all my subscribers. Well, I only had 9 of them on this channel, but yeah. Anyways, just joking around. Finishing this book, finally. This is page 234. Again, in the mid-1800s, another German illuminist was sent on a mission from the House of Rothschild to accomplish a goal of this new order for the ages. His name was Jacob Henry Schiff, 1847 to 1920. He came to New York first for the sole purpose of getting control of the United States monetary system. He eventually became the head of the banking firm of Kuhn, Loeb and Company. He bought Kuhn and Loeb out later with Rothschild money. He also became the director of many important corporations, including the New York City National Bank, the Equitable Life Assurance Society, and the Union Pacific Railroad. Using charity as a front to hide his Illuminati one-world government activities, Jacob Schiff became one of the most important successors of Albert Pike in leading the United States towards anarchy. As stated by Lenin earlier, one of the first goals of the communists is to get control of all monetary systems of the world, and this was to be Jacob Schiff's first achievement. On December 22, 1913, began one of the worst acts the communists accomplished that pushed America towards the doom it was to experience in Albert Pike's plan for world conquest. Here we will really see how the Bible is so correct in stating that we are at war with spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:12. A Republican Senator, Nelson Aldrich, proposed a National Reserve Association in 1911 consisting of a central bank, 15 branches, and a top board controlled by the nation's leading bankers, which was then dominated by J.P. Morgan, of whom we will study more of in a moment. But Aldrich's proposal never passed. However, the Illuminati conspirators landed one of their first men to become a president of the United States. His name was Woodrow Wilson. We will also look into the life of Wilson and what part he played in this conspiracy in a moment. However, before we examine how actually our presidents become candidates for the office, we should understand another achievement that Jacob Schiff accomplished in the United States. This was connecting the bankers of America, J.P. Morgan, Paul Warburg, and the Rockefellers into this Luciferian conspiracy. Gary Allen, in his book None Dare Call It a Conspiracy, states how the American big bankers formed a confederacy with Jacob Schiff, who was actually working as agent for the House of Rothschild. Quote, Paul Warburg married Nina Loeb, daughter of Solomon Loeb of Kuhn, Loeb and Company, America's most powerful international banking firm. Brother Felix married Frieda Schiff, daughter of Jacob Schiff, the ruling power behind Kuhn and Loeb. Stephen Birmingham writes in his authoritative Our Crowd, quote, in the 18th century, the Schiffs and Rothschilds shared a double house in Frankfurt. Jacob Schiff reportedly bought his partnership in Kuhn and Loeb with Rothschild money. Both Paul and Felix Warburg became partners in Kuhn, Loeb and Company. That was from None Dare Call It a Conspiracy, and page 45 it says. Senator Nelson Aldrich, whose daughter married John D. Rockefeller Jr., together with Paul Warburg and other internationalist bankers, set up a secret meeting at Jekyll Island, Georgia, to make plans to get control of America's banking systems by establishing a central bank. Some of the invited guests were Henry P. Davidson of J.P. Morgan and Company, Frank A. Vanderlett, president of the Rockefeller-owned National City Bank, Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, A. Piet Andrew, and Benjamin Strong of Morgan Bankers Trust Company. It was stressed during this secret meeting that in order to get Congress to accept this central bank scheme, the name central bank must be avoided at all costs. Out of the Jekyll Island meeting came the Aldrich Bill, but the centralization of the American banks never passed through Congress. However, these conspirators just fell back and regrouped again and renamed the central bank conspiracy the Federal Reserve Act to make it sound more like a U.S. government-run agency. And to see to it that it would pass through Congress this time, they landed their very first president in office. His name was Woodrow Wilson. Jacob Schiff, Bernard Baruch, and Henry Morgenthau, Thomas Fortune Ryan, and New York Times publisher Adolph Oakes all contributed heavily to finance the Wilson campaign. When Wilson tried to get the central bank called the Federal Reserve System to pass through Congress, he chose Representative Carter Glass to propose this Federal Reserve Act instead of Nelson Aldrich. And in December, while Congress desired to adjourn for Christmas, the Federal Reserve Act was passed by a vote of 298 to 60 in the House and the Senate by a majority. As it was during the French Revolution, so it is today. The Illuminists or Communists have penetrated into the high levels of American politics and the high levels of its governmental institutions. Be not deceived. They have their top men posing as congressmen, senators, presidents, FBI, and CIA agents, as military officers, and even as clergymen. The power of the Illuminati is money, and they use their money to gain control in the religious, political, economical, educational, medical, military, and social areas that deal with society as a whole. And during the Russian Revolution, it was under the name of Bolshevism that the Illuminati penetrated in these same areas and caused the overthrow of Tsarism in Russia. Des Griffin, in his book Fourth Reich of the Rich, has compiled some very important facts about who were working behind the scenes in the Russian Revolution. Quote, after being thrown out of France and Spain, Leon Trotsky and his family arrived in New York aboard the steamer Montserrat on January 13, 1917. Although he was never known to have a job, the Trotskys lived in a fashionable apartment and traveled around in a chauffeured limousine. For some time, the source of his wealth was unknown. Quote, Trotsky left New York aboard the SS Christianoford, bound for Petrograd to organize the Bolshevik phase of the Russian Revolution. When the ship docked at Halifax, Nova Scotia on April 3, 1917, the Trotsky Party was detained by Canadian authorities under instructions received from the British Admiralty in London. Within hours, great pressure was brought to bear on Canadian authorities by high officials in both Washington and London to recently declassified by the Canadian government reveal that the authorities knew that Trotsky's group were socialists leaving America for the purpose of starting revolution against the present Russian government. Unquote. And that's also taken from Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution by Anthony G. Sutton, page 28. But Trotsky and his group were quickly released. So, Des Griffin goes on to show where the money came from that was needed for the Russian Revolution. President Woodrow Wilson was the fairy godmother, presumably under instructions from Colonel Edward Mandell House and his backers, who provided Trotsky with a passport to return to Russia to carry forward the revolution. This American passport was accompanied by a Russian entry permit and a British transit visa. Jennings C. Wise and Woodrow Wilson, disciple of revolution, makes the pertinent comment, quote, history must never forget that Woodrow Wilson, despite the efforts of the British police, made it possible for Leon Trotsky to enter Russia with an American passport. This is taken from the same book, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, page 25. In April 1917, Lenin and a party of 32 Russian revolutionaries, mostly Bolsheviks, journeyed by train from Switzerland across Germany through Sweden to Petrograd, Russia. They were on their way to join Leon Trotsky to complete the revolution. Their Trans-Germany transit was approved, facilitated, and financed by the General Staff, unknown to the Kaiser, page 39. At this time, Max Warburg, the brother of Paul and Felix Warburg, leading instruments in shackling the Federal Reserve System on the American nation, was high up in German intelligence. Max was also the head of the Rothschild-Warburg Bank in Frankfurt. Very interesting. Can anyone doubt that the international bankers were running the whole show from behind the scenes? That's taken from Fourth Reich of the Rich, page 89 through 91. It was confirmed by the New York Journal-American of February 3, 1949, that Jacob Schiff gave $20 million in gold to help the final triumph of Bolshevism in Russia. Now we need to take a deep look into the American politics to learn how this same Luciferian threat is planning and working behind the scenes in the United States, as they succeeded in doing to the Russian people. Jacob Schiff, again, acting from orders of the House of Rothschild, planned an organization akin to that of the Jacobin clubs and the Bolsheviks in Russia. These aristocratic terrorists would penetrate into American politics as their brethren did before them in France and Russia. Woodrow Wilson was the sole property of Jacob Schiff and J.P. Morgan and other internationalist bankers. But the man who was really running things in the White House was the mysterious Colonel Edward Mandell House during Wilson's term in office. Colonel Edward Mandell House, who was a British-educated son of a representative of England's financial interests in the American South, wrote a revolutionary book which he admitted to later that revealed plans to overthrow the government of the United States. The book was called Philip Drew Administrator, and it was symbolically written to also show the detailed plans for the creation of a one-world totalitarian government. It was Colonel Edward Mandell House and the internationalist bankers who promoted Wilson as the presidential candidate. Woodrow Wilson, who was the 28th president of the U.S., served 2 terms as president from March 4th, 1913 to March 4th, 1921. But it was House who converted Wilson to accept the principles of the centralization of the U.S. monetary system. It was Colonel Edward Mandell House that helped promote the presidential candidacy of Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was Franklin D. Roosevelt who gave the communists East Germany and Eastern Europe. And it was Edward Mandell House, under the watchful eye of Jacob Skiff, who was under the watchful eye of the head of this international conspiracy, the House of Rothschild of London and Paris, that established in 1921 what their earlier comrades established to overthrow the governments of France and Russia. Called the Jacobin clubs in France in the 18th century, this aristocratic revolutionary movement today in America is called the Council on Foreign Relations, and its offshoot is the Trilateral Commission. The Council on Foreign Relations is the political side of the Illuminati today. They have produced congressmen, senators, and even presidents, and they have used to pass laws that have little by little led America into becoming a socialist country. The Trilateral Commission is an international organization founded by David Rockefeller, who also had a part in founding the Council on Foreign Relations, and who is the chairman of the board. The Trilateral Commission is the Illuminati's attempt to unite Western Europe's common market, Japan, Canada, and the United States into an economic and political confederacy. What they couldn't do through the political side of the Illuminati, Council on Foreign Relations, they are now trying through the economic approach. The first attempt in the 20th century to unite the whole world into a one-world Luciferian slave unit was tried in history by these super-rich conspirators at the close of World War I. President Woodrow Wilson on January 8, 1918, laid out a 14-point plan to Congress for lasting peace. Within this package of world peace was neatly hidden a plan for these conspirators to get all nations of the world to give up their sovereignty. It was labeled as the League of Nations. These modern money changers used World War I to make tons of money and as a tool to frighten the war-torn people of the world at that time into believing if all the governments of the world would unite into a one-world government, this would stop all wars between nations and would achieve world peace and security. The League of Nations headquarters was in Geneva, Switzerland, and it was during World War I that our own President Woodrow Wilson in 1918 began to draw the United States citizens along with the rest of the world into accepting this sham. Eventually, with the help of Colonel Edward Mandell House, 63 nations joined the League, although the total membership at one time never exceeded 58. However, President Wilson was dumbfounded when he was unable to obtain the two-thirds vote in the U.S. Senate required for ratification of a treaty, and the United States never joined the League of Nations. This caught these conspirators completely off guard because surely they thought the United States would fall for this sham, for it was the President of the United States who was promoting it. Now, when the conspirators saw their one-world government couldn't be achieved using the name League of Nations, Colonel Edward Mandell House, under the direction of Jacob Skiff, formed an aristocratic secret organization called the Council on Foreign Relations, Incorporated. This private secret society is to produce enough congressmen, senators, statesmen, so the next attempt to incorporate the U.S. into a one-world government will not fail because of the voting power they hope to have. But reader, remember, this is not a United States government-run establishment. Here from their own publication, Council on Foreign Relations Annual Report 1979 to 1980, which is controlled by David Rockefeller, we read the following on page 5, quote, "The 21 Americans who, together with British counterparts, founded in Paris in 1919 the Institute of International Affairs, were a diverse group that included Colonel Edward Mandell House, Herbert Hoover, General Tasker Bliss, Christian Herter, and such scholars as Charles Seymour, later president of Yale, Professors Archibald Carey Coolidge of Harvard, and James T. Shotwell of Columbia. In 1921, the American branch of the Institute merged with the larger existing group of New York business and professional men to form the Council on Foreign Relations." Unquote. We are living today during their second attempt for their Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New World Order. The Council on Foreign Relations is only the Illuminati front working in the United States for world government. Their brethren in England, as we have already read, are the Institute of International Affairs. Another super-rich group for internationalism, which the IRS approved, is a so-called charitable organization called the American Friends of Bilderbergers, or the Bilderbergs. The Bilderberg movement, like the Jacobin clubs in France, chose their name from the name of the meeting place where they held their first meeting. In this case, it was the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland, in May of 1954. Like the Jacobin clubs, Bolsheviks, and the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers are an aristocratic secret society for the super rich. It is made up from the world of international banking, political circles, and business and professional people. They hold top secret meetings annually to promote internationalism. The chairman of this secret society of the elite is one Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, royal consort of Queen Juliana, who is reported to be the richest woman in the world. Queen Juliana and Lord Rothschild are the principal stockholders of Shell Oil Company. While the Rockefellers control Standard Oil, the Bilderbergers are also known as the 500. Des Griffin states some names of the invited guests to the Bilderberg annual meeting in his book Fourth Reich of the Rich on page 118. Quote, "A lot can be learned from noting the names of the people who attend these clandestine annual meetings. David and Nelson Rockefeller, Emilio Collado, Executive Vice President of Exxon Corporation, Giovanni Agnelli, owner of the Fiat Car Company, Robert Strange McNamara, President of the World Bank, Heinz Henry Kissinger, Gerald Ford, Senator Matthias, Britain's Prime Minister James Callaghan, and his conservative counterpart Margaret Thatcher, Rothschild puppet president Valéry Giscard d'Estaing of France, and many other people in similar positions of various nations," unquote. Now, according to the Council on Foreign Relations Incorporated Annual Report 1979 to 1980, Henry Kissinger, Matthias, and a host of other political American figures are members of the Council. Howard Baker, George Ball, Harold Brown, Ellsworth Bunker, Donald Bush, Hodding Carter, Douglas Dillon, Arthur Goldberg, Alexander Haig, Jacob Javits, David Little, Henry Cabot Lodge, George McGovern, Robert McNamara, Walter Mondale, Donald Reagan, Dean Rusk, Adlai Stevenson III, and Andrew Young are just a few names listed in their annual report as members of this secret society. Back in the days of Wilson, their headquarters for this international New World Order was the League of Nations. Today, this masterpiece of deceptions is called the United Nations. Many of the same nations that were duped by their leaders into joining the League of Nations were duped again into joining the United Nations. The UN, like the League of Nations, was set up after the world experienced the horrors of war, in hopes that this time the war-torn people of the United States would join. The League of Nations really only differed in two ways from the United Nations of today. Instead of its headquarters being located in Geneva, Switzerland, this time the conspirators placed it in New York City, who donated the money to buy the land and the building materials to unite the nations. It was John D. Rockefeller who sank $18.5 million as a gift to the UN to buy 18 acres of land along the East River in New York, where it is located today. Gary Allen, in his multi-million bestseller None Dare Call It Conspiracy, states the following about who actually laid the foundations to this modern-day Tower of Babel. Quote, "At least 47 CFR, that's Council on Foreign Relations members, were among the American delegates to the founding of the United Nations in San Francisco in 1945. Members of the CFR group included Harold Stanson, John J. McCloy, Owen Lattimore, called by the Senate International Security Subcommittee a conscious, articulate instrument of the Soviet conspiracy, Alger Hiss, communist spy, Philip Jessup, Harry Dexter White, communist agent, Nelson Rockefeller, John Foster Dulles, John Carter Vincent, security risk, and Dean Acheson," unquote. None Dare Call It Conspiracy, page 86. As we learned earlier from the pen of the modern Luciferian prophet Alice Bailey, the most diabolical scheme to bring about a one-world religion and a one-world government shall be perpetuated through the medium of the United Nations sham. The ultimate goal today in the one-world Luciferian government conspiracy is to take the weapons away from the citizens of the world so they will have no problem exterminating those who will not bow down to their God. This is to be done by conditioning the gullible world into accepting the phony peace plan, which is to set up the United Nations as the policemen of the world. Under this plan, the United Nations would discipline any nation that would try to start a war by threatening that nation with nuclear weapons, which the nations were to hand over to them. However, as we warned before, the real motive behind this scheme is to use these weapons to cleanse the world of the billions of people who will not adhere to their wishes. Not 1 in 1,000 citizens of America who adhere to the principles of Jesus of Nazareth are aware of what is about to fall upon them. Not 1 in 1,000 American citizens, even non-Christians, have any knowledge of how organizations like the NRA, that's National Rifle Association, and their Institute for Legislative Action have kept the Luciferians from accomplishing their world takeover plans. It has been the members of the National Rifle Association and their Institute for Legislative Action who have been battling with such gun law strategists as the American Civil Liberties Union, which, by the way, was the legal organization that used Congress to abolish prayer and Bible study in public schools. They also acted as the counsel for the American Nazi Party, and they helped promote the right for a teacher to teach the principles of evolution. However, gun law supporters such as the American Civil Liberties Union and the National Coalition to Ban Handguns suffered a major setback in their plans to call for an immediate handgun prohibition. This would have eventually led to a prohibition of all firearms under a bill called Proposition 15, if passed. If it had made law in California, this would have opened the door for handgun abolition efforts across the country. Instead, because of the National Rifle Association's Institute for Legislative Action, this gun law bill was defeated by a margin of nearly 2-1. Another constitutional amendment in New Hampshire, making clear the individual right to keep and bear arms, was passed by 72% of the voters. Such defeats of ardent supporters of gun laws has only been a setback. These Luciferians never quit. Patriotic Americans must become aware of the issues of the day so that they can gain knowledge of how to fight for their rights. We are at war, but this is a spiritual battle, not a physical one. We are not to raise our 30 at 6. Is that like a gun or something? I guess I never heard of that. 30.06. Guess it just means guns. Raise our guns at these conspirators, but our voice in government. Okay, so obviously some of the information in here is a little outdated. We know they're still trying to take everybody's weapons. There are various false flags and stuff like that. But I think I can point out something pretty accurate. It talks about the conspiracy of the United Nations taking away our guns, building up its own armament to become the policeman of the world. Many truthers today, supposed truthers today, and Jordan Maxwell, praise Manly P. Hall as some kind of and by the way, I'm done with this. There's a conclusion in the back of here, but it just goes on about his Bible theology, and I don't really agree with it 100%. And all the information is sufficient enough that I gave in here. It's only about 20 pages left, so that's just the conclusion. And like I said, it's not as much information as much as this is Bible, his interpretation of Bible prophecy. So consider that book done. Yay! But anyways, truthers consider Manly P. Hall, including Jordan Maxwell, and I think a few others, consider him a truther prophet of some sort. There's a YouTube channel of Ant Mick that considers him I don't know if he considers him like a good guy or not. I guess I don't really know. But anyways, this is I'm gonna see about reading this book actually if I have the time on this channel to prove to all those truthers out there that Manly P. Hall was a pro-big government tyrant. But anyways, he has a chapter called The International Nation. The International Nation, the World Order. And this goes all the way back to 1934. Yeah, 1934, yep. So it's this chapter here. So, and the New Age magazine, which was the Scottish Rite Journal, they changed their name when people began to make the connection that, New Age, we have this New Age movement, they're all teaching the same thing. So they wanted to not give people that idea anymore, so they changed it to the Scottish Rite Journal. But when Manly P. Hall died, they honored him as Masonry's greatest scholar. So, yeah, he was definitely a part of these secret societies. I just wanted to show this quote because it verifies what I talked about, what that book talked about with the United Nations and everything, and this agrees that a Mason, later became a Mason, but we know part of the Brotherhood somehow. It says this on page 146. concerning this international nation. The international nation, if once created, would become so interdependent. That's a buzzword. That's another word for globalism. That the globalists use in a lot of their publications, interdependent. So, if once created, would become so interdependent that it would be impossible for its parts, nations, ever to separate and engage in warfare. With the international nation of reality, millions spent annually for the great powers of the earth to maintain their armaments could be largely directed to the actual development of the human race. The international nation would require no armaments. A sufficient policing system could be created by which minor factions that might insist on belligerent attitudes could be quickly brought into line. So you see, it verifies what have another globalist New World Order guy here, Manly P. Hall, that talks about creating an international nation. Obviously, this was before the United Nations was created, and that would, his concept of it was that no nations would be allowed to be armed. This United Nations, as he's calling it, would have basically the weapons, and if any nations wanted to basically oppose this international nation, those are the weapons that the United Nations took. Or whatever policing system they would have with that would deal with these nations that oppose this United Nations. So, yep. So this international army of police could be made up of a certain number of selected men from each nation. I'm going down a little bit. If for any reason a nation should insist upon retiring from the international nation and wish to withdraw its troops from the international police, it should be at liberty to do so, but no nation could hope to stand out against the solid body of the whole, meaning that the nation would survive. So these nations would be forced to give up their national sovereignty to be a part of this New World Order. This early Illuminist Manly P. Hall wrote about this book here. So I might be reading this just to show you. I mean, he says all kinds of shit in there. And, for those that, think, oh, Manly P. Hall, he won a New World Order, but this New World Order is great. It's, apparently I lost the, I thought I had it in, I guess I lost the page, but maybe I'll get into that too. But, I guess since I have some time left, I can read some stuff that I've been wanting to read on here. Turn this a little bright. Okay, this is from The Age. This is an interesting article. I'm trying to look it up to see how legit this is. It's pretty interesting, though. Cult Fights Claims of Child Sacrifice by Barney Zwartz, November 22nd, 2006. An anti-child sex campaigner accused an occult religious group of hosting parties, wait till you hear what this occult religious group is, of hosting parties at which naked children acted as waiters and at which members had sex with and murdered children, a tribunal was told yesterday. The obscure group, Ordo Templi Orientis, the O.T.O, claims Dr. Rena Michelson in the Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Program described it in a website article as a satanic cult that sacrificed children and ate their organs and blood. It has complained under Victoria's religious hatred law that Dr. Michelson and her organization vilified O.T.O members, causing revulsion, ridicule, hatred, and contempt. According to O.T.O's statement of complaint, Dr. Michelson said it was not a religion but a child pornography and pedophile ring. That its members practiced trauma-based mind control, sexual abuse, and satanic rituals to discourage its victims from complaining to the authorities, and that it condoned kidnapping street children and babies and children from orphanages for sex and sacrifice and religious rituals. The case began at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal yesterday, but was adjourned to today to allow a last-ditch attempt to settle out of court. The article, still accessible on a website run from NSW, whatever that is, suggests senior politicians, television celebrities, are a part of a top-level pedophile ring and have been protected by some police. It says some members of the ring pretended to support Dr. Michelson's campaign and became board members of her group to subvert it from within. Adam Paskowski for Dr. Michelson, who was named Young Australian of the Year in 1997 for founding the Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Program, said the article was published on the website without her knowledge or consent or authority. Dr. Michelson last year called for a royal commission to investigate her claims that Victoria police do not properly investigate pedophile ring allegations. Earlier complaints led to a report by the police in 2004 that was highly critical of two senior detectives. O.T.O members follow a religion known as Thelema, founded by occultist Aleister Crowley. I guess you can look that up and dig. I've been trying to dig on and off for it. I can't find much else. I don't know if it's 100% true or not, but again, we're hearing this all over. From the Pizzagate thing, even though it's supposedly fake news, even though we know it's not fake news, to I'm in the midst of reading this right now. Books like this. Once I get done with this, and sometimes it's good to read stuff more than once. Get all the information memorized in there. But anyways, I don't know if you can read that all the way, but this guy John DeCamp did some great research. And we know the writings of this scumbag right here. We know that he talked about sacrifice, even though Thelema members claim he was just speaking esoteric code for, playing with himself. Which I'm sure maybe he might have done just so if anybody ever went back to this to point out that these guys do that, he'll just say, "Oh, I know it sounds like I was talking about sacrificing kids. I was really meaning da 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 da." But anyways, but we know in his own writings he says that, "But the bloody sacrifice, though more dangerous, is more efficacious, and for nearly all purposes, human sacrifice is the best." And context is about sacrificing animals. I don't know if you can read. Where am I going? This paragraph right here. Where my finger's at. Bam. If I can get it. Try to get it up there. Can you read that?